My name's Mukesh Naidu from ICLEI's World Secretariat based in Bonn. I'll be moderating the sessions for today. This is the first of two sessions. The second session will take place at 5 o'clock CEST to accommodate some of our colleagues in the Americas that I guess are still sleeping at the moment. The webinar today is brought to you by ICLEI, the Government of Quebec, the Government of Catalonia, UCLG, UNEP C40 Cities, the Global Cities Hub, Regions 4, UN Habitat, and WWF. The purpose of the webinar is to reconvene as local and subnational governments ahead of INC4, hear the latest information from the Secretariat, and most importantly, get early access to the local and subnational coalition and statement that will be officially launched on the 22nd of April, just before INC4 and during the Partnerships Day hosted by the Canadian government. The discussion that will also take place will form a large part of what specific points will be taken into the negotiation on behalf of local and subnational governments. Before we get started, though, we'd like to go through some house rules and information. The session is being recorded for people that are not able to attend. Translation is available in Spanish, so please click on the translation button and toggle to Spanish. Please use the raise hand function or please use the chat function so that we have a smooth discussion and webinar and that we don't necessarily disturb any of the other colleagues or speakers. Just a note on the code of conduct. We request all participants to very quickly have a look at the link we're going to post in the chat now on ICLEI's code of conduct. All participants are requested to adhere to this code of conduct so that the webinar is a safe space and we can have free and easy flowing discussions. So before we get started, I just want to run through the agenda. I guess we were already covering the a bit of the introductions and overview for the session. We'll first hear from Idun Rognerud from the INC Secretariat on the overview of the current progress of the INC process. And Idun is an associate expert, again, with the Secretariat based in Nairobi and has extensive experience on research and on the plastics sector. We'll then go to Gabrielle Boychat, who will take us through the position statement and a bit about the coalition of the local and subnational coalition. And Gabriel is from the government of Catalonia and is the head of delegation to Switzerland. And he has a long history in the diplomacy space and has been quite active with the plastics treaty. So I'm glad to have Eden and Gabriel here. We'll then move on to a facilitated open discussion by Paul Curry, and Paul Curry is the Director of Urban Systems at ICLEI's African Secretariat, taking care of topics that include circularity, food, and water on the African continent for ICLEI. We'll then hand over to Yumi Nishikawa from WWF to wrap the session up and provide some information on the way forward. And Yumi is the lead and coordinator of the WWF Plastic Smart Cities program. We then thought we would experiment with the virtual coffee session. So once the official program is over, if you have time, we invite you to grab a cup of coffee and then we just engage in a discussion, again, a safe space. So feel free to join us, excuse me, for that. So maybe I stop now and hand over to Paul, who will take us through a bit of an exercise before we hand over to Idun.
Hi, everybody. looking forward to our discussion and to hear your thoughts on the process that we're running. It's always nice to do a round of intros, but of course that would take a full hour. So by way of introduction, if I could ask everyone to rename yourself with your organization as well, that would be very useful to understand where people are coming from. And there's a really nice little game that we can do using the chat function on Zoom called a Zoom Storm. So I'm going to ask you to open the chat and to type your reflection on this question, but don't send it just yet. We can type it in, and then after about 30 seconds, I'm going to say go, and we can see the different reflections, and I'll take us through just what the mood is in the room. So what is the most important need that you have as a local or subnational government related to plastic? So if you are representing a local or subnational government, you can type it in, or if you are working as a network or an organization that works with local or subnational governments, it'd be great to have your reflections in here. What have you seen as the most important need for local and subnational governments related to plastics? So I'll sort of type in, and then let's take 30 seconds to do this. So, oh, someone's jumped the gun and sent something through. Let's take 15 more seconds, and then we can all send together. Ahmed believes policy shift is what is needed, absolutely. Okay, are we ready? 1, 2, 3, go. Oh, my chat disappeared. Okay, so we have enforcement, coordination, technological aspects, and means of implementation. The City of Paris to have a clear, strong national or European regulations to reduce plastic production and clear definition of single-use plastic so that we avoid the false friends such as paper, cardboard alternatives, aluminium, steel cans. We've got policy shifts, we've got guidelines to have LSNG recognized not only as implementers of the international treaty, but also as capable of producing meaningful policy. Absolutely, to have local and subnational governments in this process. So thanks so much for the initial reflections. Please feel free to add them in and add comments throughout the session. I will now hand over to Idun to take us through the INC process thus far.
Thank you very much, Paul. And thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be joining you today and to give you a bit of background on the INC process, outline where we are now and where we are headed. I think we can go to the next slide. Thank you. Yeah, thanks. So 2 years ago, the UN Environment Assembly, the deciding body for UNEP, passed Resolution 514 to start the negotiations towards a legally binding instrument on plastics pollution, including in the marine environment, or in short, the INC. The INC has been meeting now for 3 times. The first time in Punta del Este in Uruguay in 2022, in November and December. And then last year in Paris in May and here in Nairobi in November. And throughout this process, we've gone from member states and observers discussing starting from what are the key elements this treaty should include until the chair of the process, with the support of the Secretariat, presenting a zero draft text to be discussed in Nairobi. In Nairobi, we really deep dived into this text, started developing it, and the members. So the member states of the INC will now, in 2 weeks, meet in Ottawa to really start negotiating the specific text that could be put into this agreement. And this is a pivotal moment in the negotiation process, as we are meant to finish the drafting of this text by the end of this year, with the hopes that we can then start the process of signing the treaty next year at the diplomatic conference. Thank you. Next slide. In 2 weeks then in Ottawa, the key focus will then be on the discussing of the revised draft text, which is available on the INC website. At this stage, hopefully all member states have had the opportunity to present their views so that they can dive into the actual negotiations, though they may still put forward new proposals for text if they desire to do so. Before the session starts, there will be regional consultations for member states to meet to align priorities and try to find ways forward. And some regional groups will also be open to observers and will have invited observers from their regions to take part in parts of the regional consultations. There will also be a partnership day hosted by the Government of Canada on the 22nd of April. And this is a separate event from the INC, but very much related in terms of it being addressing plastics pollution and having wide participation of the participants at the INC meeting. My colleague Juan Pablo, who's also joining us here today, has also prepared an observer's guide that I would strongly advise anyone who's interested in the process to look at. It's available on the link, and we can also put it in the chat. And it provides all the information that you might need on the technical aspects of the INC process and how you can engage in the process at this stage and moving forward. Next slide, please. But it's not only about what's happening at the INC meeting itself. We have also had some meetings in advance of the INC meeting to lay the foundations. Of relevance, particularly for observers, are the 2 webinars that the chair of the INC held with observers in the end of April. We had some fantastic participation in these webinars with more than 335 participants across the 2 meetings, with the chair hearing interventions from more than 50 different organizations. We are also planning a technical webinar that will take place next week on the 15th of April. This webinar will deep dive into the text as it stands now and provide guidance on how to read the text, as it is a bit technical at this stage, as well as the logistics of the session. Finally, there's plans for an informal meeting of the Executive Director of UNEP, Inger Anderson, and the Executive Secretary of the INC Secretariat, Joti Matur-Philip, for any observers who are in Ottawa on the 21st of April. And this meeting will be transmitted to any participants soon. Next slide, please. And there are also a lot of participants registered for this meeting. At this stage, we have the largest number yet, which is fantastic and really positive to see the interest, especially from civil society, local governments, any stakeholders in this process. We have more than 2,600 participants registered from all regions, and that's almost more than double the number of member state representatives. So we really see a huge interest in this process, which we are very happy about. Next slide, please. We have also prepared a number of documents that might be of interest for anyone who wants to really deep dive into the process. There is an agenda that gives the broad strokes of the meeting. However, if you want to really understand what's going to happen in Ottawa, how the text is going to be further negotiated, I would strongly recommend to read the chair scenario note, which was published this weekend. That's where you find all the nitty-gritty details and information on what will happen. Additionally, the INC Secretariat has prepared 2 background informal documents that are meant to inform the process, but that will not be discussed at the meeting, one on science and one on financing. Next slide, please. And the final thing I would like to bring up is that we are planning we're planning 3 side events in Ottawa on plastics pollution in the marine environment, approaches to capacity building, and enabling just transition. These had a deadline for expressions of interest on the 1st of March, and we will very soon publish who will be participating and presenting in these webinars. We had more than 150 expressions of interest, which is really fantastic. Next slide, please. And I think that's really it. If you have any questions, also feel free to reach out. We have an email listed here. And I also just want to emphasize how important it is that local governments and really take an active role as the future implementers of this treaty. So with that, thank you.
Idun, perfect. Thank you for that very informative presentation and overview. I know your time is very valuable and you plan on leaving shortly. So I'd like to open it up, well, the floor, the opportunity for some questions to Idun. Please feel free to raise your hand or pop your question in the chat before Idun leaves. So don't lose the opportunity. But I think Juan Pablo is still staying on for the rest of the session. So. Okay, I think maybe we don't have any questions, but in the meantime, I have one, Idun. In I think the second slide, you mentioned that there would be a diplomatic conference in 2025. What does this mean, and how does this diplomatic conference look like, you know, for taking the plastics treaty or the instrument forward?
That's a really good question. And I realize now that there was probably a lot of technical language in there that once you live in this world, you get blind to it. So the diplomatic conference is where the member states of the INC, so that is all of the member states of UNEP and the UN, can come together and start the signing of this treaty. So it's really the moment when we go from having had a draft text that's being negotiated to having the final product that is agreed and where, yeah, they can start actually committing to it.
Fantastic. Thank you for that insight. So I see no further questions. So we're a little bit ahead of schedule, but I guess we can then move on to the next speaker. And thank you again, Idun, for the information and participating this morning. Next up, I'd like to hand over to Gabriel, who will take us through the position statement. Gabriel, floor is yours.
Thank you, Magash. Hello, everyone, and thank you all for joining us today at this webinar. As Magash mentioned, I will try to explain a little bit the coalition and specifically the statement, which is the main advocacy instrument, I think, for the coalition. But before starting, I would like to give you some context. I'm sure that many of the information I will give you, many of you already know, but I think it's important to explain how and why did we decided to create this coalition. As you all know, we have a problem with plastic pollution, of course. It has become one of the most pressing environmental issues. And while global plastic production has risen exponentially in the last decades to more than 460 million tons per year, only an estimated of 9% has been recycled. Plastic makes up 85% of marine debris and are the largest, most damaging and long-lasting type of waste. The chemical that they contain affects negatively human health and environment. So we, local and subnational governments, who are on the first line of the plastic pollution crisis, and we are deeply concerned about experiencing its effects. We see very vividly the impact of the environment and local communities and want to take action. Although we are aware addressing plastic pollution is a complex issue, involving multiple sources, actors, and stakeholders. As such, it requires a whole of government and whole of society approach to deliver effective solutions. So during the first months of the INC negotiations, we saw actually that the role of local and subnational government was not taking into account. There were no references to the local and subnational government into the draft, and actually we were few of us. So that's when we decided that something was needed. and we decided to take action. Since then, local and subnational governments, we have been represented since INC4, and we've been working to strengthen our voice and to present our commitment to end plastic pollution. Therefore, we, local and subnational governments, we believe that we need to be considered as a key partner in the upcoming negotiations, since our role is key to deliver an effective, efficient, and ambitious plastic treaty. So Quebec, the government of Quebec, ICLEI, and the government of Catalonia, we decided to join forces and to work together with the networks, and we created the global coalition of local and subnational governments. So that's the context, that's the reason why, and how it went. I remember very well, especially in Paris and then in Nairobi, seeing how few of us we were. And it's when we consider that the coalition was probably the best tool, the best way to not only work together, but also to engage more and more local and subnational government, which was probably the most important needs that we had at that moment. And definitely we still have, because we're just presenting the coalition, but at least the coalition is there about to be presented. So as I said at the beginning, the statement is the main instrument of the coalition. But before going through it, maybe I will give you 3 messages. Basically, what are the objectives? The first one, as I said, is to join efforts to be together. The coalition has the collective goal of engaging member states and the INC Secretariat during and post-INC negotiation with a unified voice. And actually, that was one of the requests of UNEP to all stakeholders, be together, try to work and do advocacy together. This is probably the best way to reach your goals. So the coalition also seeks to ensure that the future international instrument on plastic pollution has a high ambition to address plastic pollution. And that's also key. We really want to work, not only because we want to be together, but actually our ultimate goal is to have an ambitious treaty. And the third message, the third message is why local and subnational government are important. Why should we be into the negotiations? Well, there are a few arguments. LSNGs, also local and subnational governments, we are the first line of plastic pollution crisis, and we are already experiencing its effects. As I said at the beginning, we are the closest level of government to the people and experiment the consequences of heavy plastic pollution on first hand. The vast majority of consumption that results in plastic pollution occurs in urban centers around the world. So LSNGs are among the first to be impacted by the plastic pollution, and it has a negative impact on the quality of urban environment, increases cleaning costs, reduces the efficiency of infrastructure, and negatively impact the health of its residents and the natural environment. Also, in many countries, LSNGs, we are the primary public administrations with competencies and budgets on areas directly related to waste plastic pollution and a just transition for formal and informal workers. And that's key. We have, for many of us, the competencies, so we can create and run policies, but also we have a budget to do it. So that's why we consider that to give an answer, we need to be there. We need to take in account. Also, we need to be responsible of that. We also believe our role is crucial, especially into the implementation phase. The implementation accountability often falls under our jurisdictions and competencies. If we are not accountable, nobody will be able to exactly be sure that the treaty is actually implemented. So we really need to be as a key actor. We also have regulatory powers and have the responsibility to develop and implement stringent regulations and activities, but also replicating and scaling. LSNGs, we can effectively contribute to ongoing and new initiatives, replicate and scale sustainable best practices, successful case studies, and support capacity building of local stakeholders. We already have good practices, but also bad ones that we can share and help other local and subnational governments to maybe not follow the same path that some of us may have and find new or best practices. Also, we can contribute to the future instrument on plastic pollution ambition by introducing language based on local best practices, including on a just transition, local regulations, recycling, and circular economy initiatives. This also includes raising awareness and fostering behavioral change among their residents and local communities. And finally, regarding waste management, any agreement that national governments will approve will ultimately have an impact on us. So that's for the three messages why we decided to create the coalition and what are the objectives at this point. But then going to the statement itself, I think I will read some of the points that are included, but in general, I think there are two main messages or two main axes. The first one is why local and subnational governments needs to be included into the treaty, and we propose specific actions to be included in the draft. And the second one, as I said at the beginning, we really want to push for an ambitious treaty. So the statement follows all the time those two ideas. I have to say that at the beginning, on the first draft, there were no mention to local and subnational governments. In the last one, there are some of them. Of course, it's a draft. We are not on the final text. It may fall out again, but definitely the work that has been done by all the stakeholders seems to have some results. So let's keep the work. So regarding the statement, I have 6 points, if I'm not wrong. The first one is that local and subnational governments, we call upon member states, and we cannot forget that all our action is directed to member states, the ones who are actually negotiating the text, or the one who will finally sign it. So that's our primary stakeholder and primary objective. So we ask them to take ambitious and effective measures to include local and subnational governments in the intergovernmental negotiation process. So not only being in the text at the end, but also being part of the negotiation process. 2, ensure that the new legally binding instrument addresses the imbalance of the plastic value chain. 3, we ask them to recognize the key role of local and subnational governments in addressing plastic pollution in the future international legally binding instrument. And explicitly place that recognition throughout the text and obligations of the plastic treaty, which will also enable local and subnational governments to support the implementation of the instrument, while taking into account financial and other resources that local and subnational governments will require. 4, lend support, which can include endorsement to the local and subnational government coalition. 5, ensure that the established measure groups and other stakeholders mechanism within UNEP is included in the instrument and enabled for any mechanisms that follows the ratification of the instrument. And finally, 6, deliver an ambitious international legally binding instrument to put an end to plastic pollution that can be successfully implemented for the benefit of residents, workers, the natural environment, and a sustainable economy, and the right of future generation to live on a healthy planet and sustainable planet. As you can see, the last one actually is the final objective of all of us. The other ones is our added value, our objective to really ensure this last point. So that's the statement, a very quick review of it. As I said, is the main document of the coalition. As Magash said at the beginning, the coalition will be publicly and officially presented in Ottawa on April 22 during the partners meeting organized, or Partners Day, sorry, organized by Canada. You are all invited to join us, of course. But now, my probably last point, raise the question of what do we need, what are our needs as a coalition. Of course, at this point, we are about to present the coalition, but sorry, our main objective is to gather the wider support and to have more and more local and subnational governments joining the coalition. This is key, and of course we get some results thanks to the negotiations and the work done by all the different stakeholders. As a result, we have local and subnational governments mentioned in the draft. But definitely, we think that having a strong coalition with wide representations of both local and subnational governments, but also a geographical representation is key. We think that make us stronger, that ensure that what we are asking for is representative of the needs. And we definitely see when we talk, and in the last week we've been discussing with some delegates, for example, here in Geneva, and how I say that, their answer to our requests are definitely different now that we can say, okay, we're coming on behalf of a coalition, even if it is still small, if I may say. We are not presented yet. But they definitely see we can definitely see the difference than before, when we get just as a government of Catalonia in my case, and we also have discussed with Quebec and Clay, but that's definitely a difference. So our request will be to ask you to review the statement, ask you to review the coalition and consider to join us. If you consider to, we will probably put on the chat the email's address to the people that you may contact. Please contact us. First of all, ask any question. We are open to make any meeting with you, virtual meeting, to answer any specific question that you may have. If you have already decided to join us, that's perfect. We're happy for that. Just send an email expressing your interest. And also, if you are local or subnational government, or if you're not, you are network, you are another kind of stakeholders, but you have contacts with these local and subnational government, please help us to spread the word. This is key. We are at a key moment for that. I think INC4 will be key to continue the discussions and to establish the coalition. And then we will have a lot of work to do in the intersection until INC5, where we can go there with a strong coalition. And I think that's it. Of course, that's the very last thing, sorry. In terms of involvement, I have to say that it's something quite open. According to your capacities, to your time you have available to participate. Of course, you can be very, very committed, a lot of time, a lot of opportunity to work with us. That will be very welcome. Of course, we need hands. But if you can only commit to sign and join the coalition, that's already a huge step for us. And that will be perfectly fine. And we will ensure to inform you at all points over the results and the next steps. So I think that's it. Magash, over to you, and thank you very much.
Gabriel, thank you for that overview of the coalition and the statement. Very succinct, and I guess you and Idun make the moderation job very easy. It's exactly 9:35 on where we planned to end your slot, so thanks for also watching the time. Just to emphasize a few points, as Gabriel mentioned, yes, the statement will formally be launched in addition to the coalition on the 22nd. At the Canadian Government's Partnership Day, but we are making early access available to local and subnationals and other interested parties. And this can be found in the link that we shared in the chat. It'll take you to the ICLEI Circulus website. If you scroll down, there will be a link to the statement. Also on this website, you'll find a Google Forms link where you could sign up interest to support, or rather sign up your support for the coalition and statement. But in addition to what Gabriel was mentioning, you could also send an email through. So we're trying to keep this process as bureaucratic free as possible. So I guess we won't go into questions to Gabrielle now. This will be addressed in the next session, the facilitated open discussion. And I'd like to now hand over to Paul Curry to take us through the discussion. Thanks, Paul. Over to you.
Thanks, Magesh, and thanks very much, Gabrielle, for the overview. I think that really shared the core arguments and the process going forward. If I were to underscore one thing here, it's the urgency of this moment. Again, we've got a few months of INC4 until INC5, but the urgency of this moment to ensure that the wording of whole of government, multi-level governance, local and subnational government are included in the treaty will shape how we as a constituency advocate for the next 5 or so years. We've seen the same being involved in the biodiversity COPs, the climate COPs, where it took many years to get local and subnational governments recognized. And if we have to spend the next 5 years making those arguments to demonstrate how important local and subnational governments are, we are not going to be spending the time advocating for what the specific needs are. So getting in right now in this text is vitally important because it'll shape the depth of advocacy that we'll be able to do right from the beginning of this instrument. So I'd like to then open for any reflections on what you've heard so far, any questions about the process, about the coalition, any specific reflections about what you're doing in your jurisdictions around plastic pollution already. We have about 15 minutes to hear some of your inputs. So any reflections you have on what we've heard thus far, colleagues, feel free to raise a hand or to unmute yourself and come in. I see a number of colleagues from local governments, subnational governments around the world. Yeah, it's here from Ahmed. Please proceed.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you, everyone. It's from the first time I come in contact with the work, actually, it's been really fascinating. And of course, I must thank all of you for the amazing work that you are doing. A bit of background, my name is Ahmed, and I'm from Community Action Against Plastic Waste. We're a non-for-profit, non-government organization working with many subnational governments over the year, particularly around plastic pollution. And of course, sharing my reflection, some of the things we've noticed is many subnational government and local government are clueless about what they can do, and of course, how they could also be able to contribute, especially in platforms like this. So leading this kind of a coalition, you don't know amount of help you're going to be doing to many of these, governments around the world. So I think this is a really, really amazing work. And of course, that must be supported by all means to ensure that it's actually successful, because like you all have mentioned, subnational governments and local governments are the heart of plastic solution around the world. Let me give you an instance. In Nigeria, for instance, the environmental issue is on a concurrent list within our constitution. What this means is that it's an issue that is legislated upon by both federal government and the state government and local government at the same time. And the most importantly, it's the local government, which is the lowest form of government in Nigeria, that is have the most responsibility in terms of responsibility distribution. For instance, the federal government, the national government, which currently represent Nigeria within the treaty, because it's domesticated at the Federal Ministry of Environment, which are the the negotiators that represent Nigeria. They only come up with policies. That's the only thing that they do. They come up with the policy, expected that policy to trickle down, to the rest of the country. A lot of time, and this is one of the failure of the climate COP in Nigeria, I can tell you authoritatively, because when it comes to implementation, because the subnational government and local government are not carried along, then it becomes difficult to actually, implement all of these in agreement, or even a lot of things that the national government agreed to in this international forum. So when they come back, it's difficult to communicate it to local government and subnational government, and of course to implement them. The national government needs to send people. We have 36 states across the country. So Nigeria is a huge country, as you can imagine. So they have to send people to work to do few projects, or maybe implement in few places. So it's really difficult to make any progress, really. But just not to take a lot of your time, it's just to emphasize that this is really important. And of course, we're happy to work, with this coalition, in supporting many subnational and local governments in Nigeria and a few other countries that we work. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ahmed, very much for drawing that, demonstrating that national and local governments are quite separate in these processes. Absolutely. I see Lila Durix.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Just putting my camera on. I will be really short, and I hope the sound is clear enough for everyone. I have two questions on the policy statement. This is a really strong document and a really strong text. Two questions of understanding for the city of Paris. The first one, in our point of view, but I guess this is really a collective negotiation. There is a hierarchy to defend on the plastic treaty, and I didn't see the word reducing strongly enough emphasized on the policy statement. I just saw minimize. Maybe there is an explanation behind it. And a last question was there is a mention on the waste workers and the fossil fuel industry workers that we need to take care of during the transition out of plastic. Just to be clear, for the city of Paris, bio-based plastic are not a good alternative for plastic reduction, but is it also the same understanding for the policy statement as well? This is it for me. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Colleagues, would anyone like to respond, or shall we collect questions and share reflections after this? The two questions, as a coalition, are we emphasizing reduction versus minimization? And are we on the same page about bio-based plastics as Paris? Magesh?
Thanks, Paul. Maybe I take the first question that Lila was asking about the kind of the ambition that we're wanting, and mentioning specific words, minimize as opposed to ban, reduction, and so on and so forth. Maybe Lila, to give some context, the statement that we shared on the link was written over quite a few months. Actually, planning started while we were at Nairobi, or in Nairobi, for INC3, and we had lots of discussion on the specific wording. The statement is, I guess, meant to be a rallying point for local and subnationals. The ambition, we do agree that needs to be as robust as possible. What will happen is that the statement is not the only touch point between the coalition and the negotiating table, so to speak, but it is kind of this the rallying cry, so to speak. The detailed points would actually be synthesized by the team participating at INC4, where specific wording is requested to be included, in specific paragraphs, operative or preamble paragraphs that would address these comments. So what I'm saying is, yes, we share the concern for more ambition, but at the same time, we've kept the statement a bit more broader, so that it acts as a platform for everybody. Maybe I stop there, Paul, and hand back to you. Thanks.
Thanks, absolutely. I think we're navigating through many different perspectives, and at the heart of it is we want to make sure that whatever form the treaty emerges in has local and subnational governments as central actors in it. And then as part of that, absolutely trying to emphasize the ambition of local and subnational governments, who tend to be more ambitious in their practice, knowing what citizens want. Engineer Noy, I saw your hand up. I don't know if you want to come in. Otherwise, take further hands.
Yes. So good morning from Accra, everybody. I believe you can hear me.
Yes, coming through well. Are you able to turn your camera on?
Oh, okay. Let me see.
It's okay if not.
Is it okay now?
Yes, there we go. We can see you.
Yes. So mine is simple. I very much share the concerns of my colleagues from Nigeria. Most often than not, these international treaties, when we are doing, we who are the implementing agencies, we are the implementers of whatever policies that emanate from the top. It is just fine and fair that some of us will be carried along from scratch and then we'll make our contribution, because at the end of the day, the buck stops with us. One thing I don't see in the zero draft or in the wordings is banning of certain categories of plastics in terms of the size, where we can be specific and then restrict the production to a certain limit in terms of the microns of the size of plastics. This is because if we leave it on the national governments, some governments are quite weak and they are reluctant to be able to take the bull by the horns and be able to carry that through. Why don't we carry that into the treaty at the international level to make it binding on national government to at least put some form of ban on certain categories of plastics? Because at the end of the day, these business guys, they hop from country to country, and wherever serves as a safe haven, then they are producing. At the end of the day, when the pollution happens and it flows eventually into the ocean, there are no borders in the ocean. And then aquatic life will be extinct and then causing all the harm that it needs to cause. So for me, I don't know if it is not too late. Instead of leaving it for certain, what we call national governments to do this, why don't we do it from the international level to make it mandatory? Then we pick it up from there. Because at the end of the day, microplastics are harming a lot, and to the extent that they are causing infertility in men. Men are becoming sterile just because of the consumption of microplastics. And studies have proven this. So it is the sizes of these carrier bags and very thin film plastics that are being produced that are able to immediately degrade into the microplastics. And for me, all these talks about biodegradable plastics is a sham. It's just it's a sham. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Engineer Noy. So there are negotiations going on around total bans versus reductions, and I think we can follow up later around how to feed these ideas in there. I think similarly to the comments from Paris, how we position ourselves is also very delicate in this. So thank you very much for the input. Any further reflections, comments, thoughts, ideas? Thank you for those who've been putting things into the chat. Lovely to see Elga here. Thanks, Elizabeth, for sharing them as positions in Kenya. Welcome to take any further reflections, validations, comments, demands. What do you need us as a coalition to do? Go ahead, Pablo.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, thank you, Paul. And for me, it's quite thrilling to have this coalition taking shape. It's really an important one, especially for local and subnational governments, of course. Perhaps a reflection would be to make sure that this coalition really is streamlined within the global multilateral processes that shape the advocacy of local and regional governments. And by this, I mean, make sure that this is a coalition that is well known, well spread, that reaches everyone who wants to come and breathe life into it. Because as we have heard from the ANC Secretariat, they're really looking at this constituency to see how an international treaty can be implemented at the ground, and I think in new ways. So I'm really happy that we can take part of this process. So thank you.
Thanks very much for the words of support, Pablo. We have two minutes before we'll have a closing reflection. Ragesh, you're pulling rank over our other colleagues. Ragesh, go ahead.
Never, Paul. It's an inclusive platform, and I don't believe in rank. And I have to say that we're being recorded, right? But just to mention, or just to share some thoughts on a complete banning of some plastic products that our colleague was talking about just now. I think, I mean, it makes sense when you look at it at face value, but if we go into the details, we start to see a very different picture, particularly if you take and look at it from an inclusivity point of view. I'm going to share a little bit of the details, but when I guess Paul's team was working on the design, we also included a bendy straw inside part of the design elements. And we had some inputs from our C40 colleague, and I think it was Cindy, if I'm not mistaken, that bendy straws should actually not be included in this because it provides it's an essential part for people with some disabilities to allow them to to drink liquids and so on and so forth. So I think outright bans sometimes need to be looked at carefully, and there are alternatives. We could use silicone and stuff like this, but then you start talking about the economics of such alternatives. So I think a very moderate but ambitious approach is needed. But I stop there, Paul. Thanks.
Thanks, Mukesh. Now, this process has been very fascinating in terms of seeing different people's arguments emerge and then thinking how they land in cities, in local and subnational governments. And maybe just by way of closing the discussion here, I think from what our colleagues have shared, the four inputs we've had, has demonstrated very clearly that local and subnational governments are more ambitious than a lot of what we're hearing. And so how we as a coalition think about that and position ourselves is going to be very important for us to think about. So thank you so much for the input thus far. I think we have put aside an informal 20 minutes available if you'd like to stay and ask more direct questions to us in a less open forum. We'll turn off the recorder. So be welcome to stay with us after the hour. But in terms of our formal proceedings, let me hand over to Yumi to close us and offer us some next steps and way forward.
Thank you so much, Paul. Thank you so much, Magash. And of course, Gabriel and Aiden and the whole of the ICLAI team for putting this event together. Feel like I have the easiest job for today's webinar, which is basically to deliver this closing remarks, and to say, of course, thank you to all of you who participated in the webinar today and for the great questions. We all want to see a very ambitious treaty that will hopefully come together by the end of the year. Special thank you, of course, to the government of Catalonia for supporting this event, and also providing us, I think, with a Spanish translator so more people can participate. A couple of things to note before we end the call is to urge everyone to help us spread the word about the coalition and our ambition. The coalition is intended to highlight the importance of the role of local and subnational governments' input, commitment and position, which will be taken to INC4, further to INC3, and hopefully beyond as well in 2025, as we try to implement a global treaty across different countries. And those who work closely with local government or is part of the local government, we hope to see more municipalities and voices from various parts of the world join this coalition. For those who will be attending in Ottawa and INC4 later this month, please also join us for the official coalition launch on April 22nd during Partnership Day, which is hosted by the Government of Canada. And the link to the statement for the coalition can be found in the chat box, which will be pasted there later. And lastly, please don't forget, we are trying virtual coffee, which I think is correct me if I'm wrong, Magash, is a new sort of way so we can informally get to know each other and also chat about the coalition and what we all expect during INC4 and INC3. So please stay with us. And over to you, Paul and Magash. Thank you very much again.
Perfect. Yumi, thank you for those closing remarks, and thank you as well for supporting the coalition and actively participating and shaping everything.